Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be discussing the first two dynasties of ancient China. Remember, a dynasty is ruled by generations of one family. That just means that generation after generation, the power is passed down through family members. So, brother to brother, father to son, and so on. So we're going to talk about the first two dynasties of ancient China. Now, as you complete this discussion, I want you to jot down the notes on the screen. And then once the discussion is all the way complete, then I want you to go to the Ancient China Dynasties notes in Google Classroom and write the notes in the Shang and the Zhou Dynasty columns. So all the notes for the Shang Dynasty will go in its column, and all the notes for the Zhou Dynasty will go in its column. Okay, so once this discussion is done, then you will go to a Google Doc that looks exactly like the one I have on the screen. So just a piece of background information that you've already read about and heard about in a previous video. Farming settlements grew around the Huanghe River. This river is also known as the Yellow River. These settlements were led by chiefs. So remember the Yellow River, the Huanghe River. It's yellow because of the silt or the louse, the yellowish deposit from that blew from the desert, and once the Huanghe River floods, it leaves the louse on the soil and it makes it fertile for farming, which is good for farming. Just like the same concept in India, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. So they all kind of settled originally around the river. And then what ends up happening is you have these settlements, these small villages. And then stronger chiefs from these villages start taking over different villages as well. So that's when we go into dynasty mode for ancient China. So we're going to talk about the Shang Dynasty. So the Shang Dynasty is the earliest Chinese dynasty according to written record. This dynasty began around 1766 BC when Shang family kings began taking over additional cities. So it started to expand its land. They controlled the central portion of the North China Plain. So if you look at the map on the screen, the purple is the Shang Dynasty. You see it is in the central part of the North China Plain. Remember, that's flat land. That's the land that's good for farming. It's surrounded by the desert and the mountains, so you want to find some flat land. And also, it is home to the Yellow River. So they can use the river and its louse deposits when it floods to have adequate farmland. That's why the civilization grew around that area. Also, because of the vast amount of harvest, because the land was so good for farming, they had extra. And so as they harvested a surplus, and as they continued to expand and conquer other cities, the Shang Dynasty became very wealthy. And they used this wealth to support a large army with chariots, which is the drawing the illustration on the screen, right? Horse-drawn chariots. The Shang Dynasty also used this wealth to build several large cities that were surrounded by walls. They also used this wealth to build dikes, and dikes are kind of walls built to hold back the floodwaters. So when the Yellow River flooded, these dikes were created to kind of hold that water back and to save the land and the cities from damage. Okay, they needed a strong army because you had a group in the northwest part of China known as the Zhou people. They were a nomadic group at this time, and they continue to be in constant conflict with the Shang Dynasty. So the Shang Dynasty needed a strong army to defend its land. The Shang Dynasty also had a belief of respect for one's parents and ancestors. They would make sacrifices to their ancestors, such as animal sacrifices to their ancestors, in hope that they would bring good fortune to the family. Also, the Shang Dynasty developed the first writing system in China. It started with oracle bones. And now you probably read this and was like, what is going on with these oracle bones? But what would happen is they used these oracle bones to receive messages from God. So this is what they would do. The royal priest would write questions to the gods on the outside, as you see in the photograph. So they would write the questions to the gods, and then they would take a hot, heated rod, touch the oracle bone until it heated up and it cracked. Then the royal priest would interpret the cracks, all right, meaning that they would find the answers within the cracks that were created. And then they would write, or they would scratch the answers on the bone itself. So they use these oracle bones to talk and communicate with the gods. Also, the Shang Dynasty not only had this system of oracle bones and communicating with the gods, but they also had a fully developed writing system using pictographs. All right, we talked about pictographs earlier with other writing systems, right? It's not an alphabet letter based, but it's pictures, little pictures that symbolize something, a sound, a word, etc. And to barely read and write with this writing system, you would have to know 1,500 characters to barely read and write. To be educated, you would need to be able to read and write 10,000 characters. Okay, so the Shang Dynasty created this writing system using pictographs. If you see the Chinese writing of today, and you can look it up after this video, a lot of the characters from the Shang Dynasty, from this writing system, is still used today in China. Different meaning, but for some of them, but the same characters. So a lot of, and the Shang Dynasty is best known for their bronze work as well. So they went from the stone tools and stone weapons and very basic to now bronze metalwork. So artisans would make bronze pots, and cups, and weapons. So there's an example on the screen. They use these bronze works for religious ceremonies. They would use it for human and animal sacrifices, where they would use bronze blades to help prepare the sacrifice, either a human or animal. They also use bronze weapons, but the tools for like farming and everyday use, they would not use bronze. It was more for the religious aspect of the Shang Dynasty. All right, the real big takeaway is this fully developed writing system. All right, that's how we know a lot about the Shang Dynasty is through this writing system. So there is this cycle that dynasties went through in China. Dynastic cycle in China. So what would happen is you would start with a strong dynasty which establishes peace and prosperity. It is considered to have the mandate of heaven. So the mandate of heaven is the belief that they have God's approval. So you would have a time of peace, prosperity, kindness, justice for all, something like this time. And then it would eventually go, just like a cycle. The dynasty declines and becomes corrupt. Taxes are raised. Power grows weaker. And then a disaster such as a flood, a famine, peasant revolt, invasion happens. Now, when something bad happened, like a flood or like a peasant revolt or an invasion, the people would see this as a sign that the dynasty lost God's approval. The dynasty lost the mandate of heaven. So the old dynasty is seen as having lost the mandate of heaven, and the people would rebel against it, against the dynasty, because it's justified now. You lost God's approval. We need someone new in charge. So the dynasty is overthrown through bloodshed. A new dynasty emerges, and the new dynasty gains power, restores peace and order, and claims to have the mandate of heaven. And then you continue this cycle over and over again. So that's how the Zhou dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, I should say, the Zhou dynasty justified them becoming or taking over the Shang dynasty and becoming in full control of this China, this region in China, is because of this cycle and this idea of the mandate of heaven, having God's approval. So make sure this is in your textbook. Make sure you look it over, study it, know the cycle, all parts of the cycle. So the Zhou dynasty, they had the right to rule called the mandate of heaven. They began this idea, the mandate of heaven. Rule had God's approval. The ruler had God's approval. And them, if a ruler became in charge, they won the battle. The victory was proof that they should be in charge. The mandate of heaven can be taken away from God as well. And the one thing the mandate of heaven did do, for the most part, is it forced rulers to treat people kindly and justly because they did not want to lose favor with the people. They didn't, because even a uprising could be a sign that they lost the mandate of heaven. So rulers treated people better because of this idea of the mandate of heaven. All right, the Zhou dynasty defeated the Shang dynasty in 1027 BC. The Zhou dynasty is and was the longest lasting dynasty of ancient China. So they began the mandate of heaven. They also lasted about 600 years until we had a period of chaos known as the Warring States period. So you see the Zhou dynasty, the map at at the bottom of the page. Okay, so if you look at the map at the bottom of the page, right, you see how it's the Zhou Dynasty is cut into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different states. Each state was ruled by a warlord. A warlord was a military ruler of these small states. These states were constantly fighting for land and power. Okay, so they were constantly fighting. That's why it's called the warring states of China. Now, this was a time of chaos. Chaos means disorder and confusion. As you know, as they fight among themselves, loyalty to the Zhou dynasty disappears. And in 256 BC, the last Zhou ruler is overthrown. So, and again, remember, when there's chaos, when there's invasion, when there's fighting, it is a sign that they lost the mandate of heaven. They lost God's approval. But the Warring States period also brought new technology, new ideas. And so during this time, they learned to make iron. Okay, iron is stronger than bronze. Iron was used for weapons, to make stronger weapons. Iron was also used to make stronger tools. And the stronger farm tools they were more effective. And since they were more effective, they led to a more yield or more crops. Okay, which then led to more wealth and trade. And so with the trade, the Zhou dynasty was the first to use coins to trade. So instead of doing like a bartering system, during the Zhou dynasty, they first used coins to trade. All right. They actually created a large trading system among the lands of the dynasty as well. And the last thing is, during the Zhou dynasty and the constant fighting at the last section of their rule, there was the invention of the crossbow. Okay, so this is the end of the discussion on the first two dynasties of ancient China. Now you can go complete the notes using the information that you just got done watching.